Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And welcome to BTN Live.
Yes.
On this glorious Friday afternoon. You've probably noticed that I am not Jack or Amelia or the regular host of BTN Live.
Yes.
But I am Joe, and this is Nat.
Hello.
Nat is our reporter for this week, and what's the story that we're talking about today, Nat?
Today we're talking about elections. The Australian federal election was the story that I did on BTN this week. Well, I did two, you see, but we're talking about elections today. But the story is about all of the things that the Prime Minister has to do in the lead up to an election. So for us to be able to have an election in Australia, there are some rules that need to be followed. Obviously, rules are important to make sure the process goes as planned, and also so that certain boxes can be ticked so that the election process is the same regardless of when it's held. I
am currently just running some troubleshooting on the computer at the moment, so we can actually see your questions.
Right.
But unfortunately, I'm not having such luck.
Would you like to use my phone here?
I will use this phone so we can actually
decent backup.
Dig into some of these questions. We've got a lot of questions here this week.
Yes, thank you very much for submitting all of your questions. Some of them made me go away and do a little bit of research because I needed a refresher. And so some of them are really good. And if you haven't yet sent a question through, you're more than welcome to jump onto the BTN website and submit your questions there. We will keep refreshing the page. We'll check them as well.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to kick off with a pretty chunky one from Hafsa at Yucca Homeschooling. Hello, Hafsa. Thank you for tuning in if you are here. The question is, why are the two leaders fighting over ruling the country for only 3 years and not 5 or 6 years?
It's a good question because in Australia, we have federal elections every 3 years. But in some states and territories, I'm saying some because I'm not sure off the top of my head if it's all of them, but in the Northern Territory, it's every 4 years for a territory election. But on federal stage, why do we have elections every 3 years? It seems like a bit of an odd number. The US has elections every 4 years. And so this question is, why not 5 or 6 years? Well, basically it's because it's the law. So back when Australia was started, a bunch of people who are no longer with us made a bunch of laws that helped to govern the country, and they basically decided on the number of years. But that can change, just like any laws. It's up to our politicians to make new bills and laws and try and change the law if they want to. And actually last year, there was a little bit of a rumble from within Parliament House with the political leaders sort of floating the idea of extending the election term, the period of time between elections.
Yes.
Because to have an election every 3 years,
it's not a very long time.
It's not a very long time, and
a lot of governments don't really have time to implement everything that they want to in that time.
Yeah.
And so lots of things get promised and started, but never really finished.
And I don't know about you, but I mean, for Joe and I at least, for me at least, it feels like not too long ago since we had the last election, because we were very involved in that one and making stuff for BTN, and that was a lot of fun. But
and we're going to have to do it all again in a matter of weeks, probably.
I can't believe it's already been 3 years. So
time has flown by.
Yeah, so to answer your question in short, it basically is because it's the current law in Australia, because people decided on that years and years ago, but it can be extended, and also there has been that discussion happening even just last year when I did a bit of research.
I wonder why that discussion stopped.
Maybe they had other things to focus on.
Probably. There's lots going on in the world.
I
wonder if that's going to come up at some point again.
Yeah.
We have another question here from Danica at Cherrybrook Primary School in Sydney.
Cherrybrook's a nice name.
It is a nice name. Sounds like a lovely place. I wonder if they have cherries. How can an election get cancelled? Can an election be cancelled?
Can an election be cancelled? Off the top of my head, the one way you can cancel an election is to put your government into what's it called when it's military government?
Martial law.
Martial law. So because that happened recently in South Korea very briefly, and then they turned it back, and that's also what's happened in Ukraine because Ukraine is in a war. So their parliament has decided to not have elections right now. So Volodymyr Zelensky is able to be the president for longer than if they weren't in a war and they hadn't declared martial law. So that is one way you can cancel an election. But whether or not, like, let's say you're in peacetime, your country's going fine, there's no need to declare that. I actually don't think there is a way to cancel an election, because I think if you were to do that, you would find that a lot of people would get very angry.
Yes, because you're meddling with democracy.
Yes. So if you're in a democracy like we are in Australia, it's very important that everyone has a say. Everyone that's allowed to vote can. Maybe that's another thing about the 3 years to 4 years thing. Maybe we're taking the pulse of the country too often. Maybe that's the argument. Anyway, so basically, I don't think you could do it easily, or I don't think you should.
Now here's an interesting one.
Yes,
from Felix at St Patrick's Primary School.
Hello, Felix.
Hello, Felix. While the government is in caretaker mode, what is the PM doing? Is he just sitting back, relaxing?
Yeah, he's grabbing
Cup of tea.
If you watch the story, he's grabbing a mop and a bucket, and he's just cleaning up around the place. No, he's still very much the Prime Minister. So one of the things in my story I talk about very briefly during caretaker mode is that the government is still the government. The executive is still the executive, as they say, which just means that, they're still in power. If they want to make big policy decisions, they can, but usually they don't, because this is a time when the focus isn't on trying to make a bunch of changes, it's on focusing on the campaign. And so that's kind of why there's a bit of a cool-off period where politicians aren't focusing on, passing new policies or signing big contracts with other countries or that sort of thing. They're focused on trying to get voted in. Does that answer the question? What was the question again?
I believe that does. While the government is in caretaker mode, what's the PM doing?
Yeah, so the PM is still the PM, and
PM.
he can still do PM things. But that is...
He'd be campaigning.
He'll be too busy campaigning.
Exactly. He doesn't have time to sign any big orders because he's out there meeting the people and getting them to vote for him.
Too busy shaking hands with people and kissing babies on heads and posing for awesome photo shoots with the public.
Yes. Yep. And appearing on BTN.
Appearing on BTN.
This is a call out, Mr. Albanese, if you want you back. Now, why is there a media blackout around the caretaker period? That question is from R and TJ from North Ainslie Primary.
Hello to... Is it R and TJ? So
R
both?
and TJ, there's two.
Hello, R
There
and
we
TJ. Why is there a media blackout? Well, similar to the cooling off period that the government does, back in the day, it was decided that there should be a cooling off period for the public. I think it was 3 days before the election actually happens. So back when everyone used to watch like TV and radio as their main way of consuming the news and media, it was important that in the days leading up to the election, the 3 days leading up to it, people didn't get bombarded with political ads. That's why that rule exists. But it has been called into question because nowadays a lot more people are consuming media via their phones and via online platforms, and there are no rules that say the media blackout has to apply to social media, for example. So it's a little bit old-fashioned, but it does explain why if you are watching a channel that has commercials on it, you won't be seeing any political ads for the last 3 days of the election. But from the moment they call the election up until those 3 days, you'll be seeing them a lot. And obviously,
hammered.
if you're still if you're scrolling or you're watching YouTube or whatever, you'll still almost certainly see ads there.
And you may even see more because the politicians are jumping on the socials, making their own videos, which are ads in their own right.
Yeah, but they don't even count as ads really. They're just hoping that the algorithm will promote them as like actual video. So there's many ways we'll bump into the politicians.
Exactly. We can't get away from them.
Yeah.
That's not a threat. Now, obviously, we're getting close to when the election should be called, but it hasn't been called yet. Yes. So this question from Nisa, also at North Ainslie Primary School, is what happens if the PM doesn't call an election?
That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that one.
There's got to be some ruling around that.
I think it might... Earlier, someone else asked what would happen if can you cancel an election?
Yes.
My guess is that if the Prime Minister doesn't call an election, there will also be people that are upset. But in terms of what actually happens, I don't think that has ever happened in Australia's history. So
I wonder if someone steps in and goes, "No, we need to call the election now."
yeah, and I wonder if that person's the Governor General.
That's a good point.
Because anyway, I'm not sure off the top of my head about that one because it has just never happened before.
And speaking of the Governor General, there was a question here about the Governor General that
the Governor General.
Would like to find. Speak amongst yourselves for a moment.
Oh yes, the Governor General in Australia is above the Prime Minister, and they are chosen by the King. But usually the King asks the Prime Minister, "Hey, who do you think should be the Governor General?" So that's how the Governor General is chosen, and the Governor General does have the power to step in if they see that things are going wrong, and they have the power to dismiss the Parliament, whatever it's called, to basically. It's happened in Australia's history before where a Prime Minister has been removed by the Governor General because they weren't happy with the job that they were doing. And so that is, they do have the power to do that. Anyway, what is the question?
So that may have answered some of this question, but the question is, if another party is in power, will the Governor General stay the same?
That's a good question.
That question is from, let me just call it, that is from Michaela at Daniela Heights Primary School.
Lovely. Thank you for the question,
Michaela. Sorry, I think I said that. Dianella? Dianella Heights.
Dianella, yep.
Sorry, yep. I said that wrong. Dianella Heights.
Dianella Heights. Governor Generals are usually chosen for 5-year terms, but there are no fixed terms on Governor Generals. So when the King decides who the Governor General is, usually the King will go to the Prime Minister at the time. Hey, who do you think should be Governor General? The Prime Minister will put forward a recommendation and the King will usually accept that. So it does mean that the Governor General can outlive or outlast the current government, because usually their terms go for about 5 years, but there's no fixed, hard and fast rule. So it can be a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, depending on, I suppose, if they want to, wrap the job up or I don't know, maybe if the King's unhappy with their job, I don't know. So usually...
Maybe the Governor General is the one who's saying that Prime Ministers can only be in for 3 years and no longer.
Hey.
He doesn't want to be out-careered.
Out-careered
by the Prime Minister.
Yeah, so in short, yes. So the Governor General doesn't change at the election necessarily.
Yep. Now, Poppy from Rendlesham Primary.
Oh, Rendlesham Primary, that's a familiar name.
Hello again. Hello, Poppy. She's asking, or he, why can't I get elected?
Oh, well, it's first of all, as a good question. If you're still in primary school, you can't because you're under 18. But other than that, actually,
anyone over 18 can put their hand up.
I've actually got a list of things here. So to be Prime Minister, right? We want to be Prime Minister.
Of course.
Okay, so in order to be Prime Minister, you need to join an existing party or make your own, or you could be an independent, but an independent's never become Prime Minister. So your best bet is to join an existing political party, and probably Labor or Liberal or the Nationals, because those are the three big ones in Australia. So what else do we have to do? You cannot be a Prime Minister if you've been convicted of treason. So that's, hopefully you haven't done that. A bunch of other things, but basically the main rules are you have to be 18, an Australian citizen. You have to be an elector, so you have to be someone who can vote. There are a bunch of crimes you can't do, like bribery or interference. Or treason. Yes, those are some pretty bad ones if you're thinking about running the country. You shouldn't do that. Hang on. Disqualification being for 2 years from the date of conviction. So perhaps even after 2 years of being found guilty of those crimes, you could give it a go, become PM again. But basically, if it's very similar to whether or not you're eligible to vote, with a couple of extra steps, because you can be a voter and still have no chance of being Prime Minister if you're not a part of a party that has the potential to win.
You can be a voter and have committed treason. It is possible.
Would not recommend it due to it being against the law.
Exactly. We would not recommend treason. Do not do it. Now, so we spoke there about the three powerful parties there. So this question from Tyson, Yucca Homeschooling, says, can there be more than two people in an election? Please pick me.
Well, we have picked you.
For the election or for the question?
Oh, yes. Can there be a third person, and can it be Tyson?
Can it be Tyson?
Would we vote for Tyson as Prime Minister? So Tyson, basically, yes, there are plenty more than 2 people. The only thing that is... the main reason why we focus on the 2 leaders that we do, Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton, is because in Australia's history, or recent history, because back in the early days there were other parties, but it's basically most of the votes go to those 2 parties, so it's very likely that at the end of the day one or the other is going to win. If for some reason more than half of the votes went to a different person or a different political party, they could become Prime Minister, and but usually they don't get enough seats in the House of Representatives to become the leader. So yes, there are definitely more than 2 people in the election, but when we're sort of zooming out and going, okay, who's going to be Prime Minister at the end of the day, it's usually only between those 2.
Have there been a Prime Minister in Australia's history that hasn't been from either of those parties?
That's a good question. Because earlier on, the Labor Party has been there since Federation, but the Liberal Party has only existed since 1944. I think it is 1944. It's around the end of the war, but it's about there. And so obviously there have been other parties that have come and gone, and so in short, yes, but specifically I couldn't answer that question because I do not have all the answers on the top of my head.
Well, here's one that's going to be a hard-hitting one. Lincoln from Rendlesham.
Hello, Lincoln.
Would you elect me if I was in it?
Oh, well, that's what I joked about with Tyson. Would I vote for Lincoln? Well, first of all, Lincoln, if you're going to convince me or Joe or anyone of the Australian public, you're going to have to put together a campaign. Tell us what you're about. If we vote for you, what do you believe in? What's the most important things that you want Australia to know you're passionate about, and why we should vote for you? And then we can chat. Also, you have to be over 18, and all the rules that we said before. Don't do any treason, that sort of thing.
No treason.
Yeah.
A question here from Izzy at the Good and Beautiful Homeschooling Tasmania.
Good. But from the sounds of things, it's good and beautiful.
Homeschooling. That is brilliant stuff. So the question from Izzy is, where did the parties get their names?
Oh, good question, Izzy. This is going to be challenging for me because I looked at their websites to try and figure out where the names come from, but I temporarily forget. But both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party have a little spiel on their website that talks about where they chose their names. Did you say you know where the Labor Party gets its name from?
So I did a story on unions, and originally the Labor Party came from the union movement, and the Labor Party was formed by labourers, people who did trades, stonemasons, woodworkers and the lot, and that's where the name Labor came from.
There you go. And I forget the exact wording that the Liberal Party used on their website, but the reason they chose the word liberal was because it aligned with their...
I'll find out.
Thank you, because there were specific words that I can't remember, but basically they chose that word because it aligned with the direction that they wanted their party to go in. So they started off as words that were chosen to, focus their attention towards a certain matter or group of people. But yeah,
describes their intentions in a nutshell.
Yes, in a nutshell.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got some new questions coming through.
Great.
Here's one that I would love to know the answer to as well. It's from Hannah, North Ainslie Primary.
Hello, Hannah.
Where was the first democracy sausage cooked?
That's a great question.
That's an excellent question. And I would love to know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know the answer
I do not know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. We might have to investigate that one ourselves.
BTN investigates. There used to be a thing we did was BTN would just
I'm going to pitch that as a story.
Let's pitch that as a story.
I think that's quite interesting.
Great idea. Someone will pick that up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The first democracy sausage. That's so catchy as well.
It is.
I'd click on that video and
Absolutely,
watch that.
Yeah. So great question, Hannah. Another one from Alistair.
Hello, Alistair.
Is, how is our election different to the American election?
Well, couple of different ways. In the story, I don't know if this made it in, but when I was writing the story, I actually spoke about the difference between how we elect our Prime Minister and how the US elects its president. Because basically in the US, I won't get into it, but you you vote for who you think should be the president, whereas in Australia, you vote for who you think your local representative should be for your electorate. That's like kind of like your suburb, but usually it's a bit bigger and slightly different border. Basically, it's the place where you live, and everyone votes for someone to represent that area. And then at the end of the day, everyone in their different electorates around Australia votes, and however many people... the party with the most number of seats filled in the House of Representatives ends up becoming the party in power, and then it's their leader that becomes Prime Minister. Whereas, in the US it works a little bit differently. You can, on your ballot sheets in Australia, it won't just say vote for Anthony Albanese, vote for Peter Dutton. It'll have a bunch of names for the local representatives in your area.
MP.
Sorry?
Local MP.
Local MPs, yes.
Yep.
So that's the main way that our federal elections are different.
Yep, slightly different.
In terms of how they run.
Yep. And that, I think that actually answers this question from Annie, also from North Ainslie.
Hello,
was,
Annie.
why don't we vote for the Prime Minister directly? But I think you pretty well covered it there.
Yep.
What else have we got there? Another good question from Ruby. Who is not telling us where she's from because of the internet safety episode. Thank you, Ruby.
There you
Good
go.
Listening. It says, who made sausages at voting places a thing? I reckon this should all be stuff that we cover in another story.
I think we've got to get to the bottom of that.
Absolutely.
Had to start somewhere.
Let's see. We've got some new questions coming through.
In the meantime, I can tell you how many parties there are at the moment. So maybe this leads into that earlier question about are there more than two people in the election? Yes, and right now there are 54 different political parties in Australia that you can vote for federally, but obviously not every electorate is going to have someone from one of these parties sitting in it, because there might be smaller parties. So, but anyway, in Australia at the moment, we've got 25. 50,
oh my goodness, that's 50, a very big list.
It's a very long list.
That's huge.
It's basically 54 different ones. However, there's a couple of caveats because, for example, from number 10 to number 18 is the Australian Labor Party, and then every single state and territory branch. So really, there's a couple of double ups in there because there are branches of major political parties. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to choose from.
I should have found a good question by now.
Okay.
There are so many questions. I'm just reading through all of them as they're coming through.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I'm not good at this.
I'm seeing him struggling right now.
Yeah, no, look. How long have we been having elections for? From Ben at Kelmscott Senior High.
That's good. Well, I'm going to say at least since 1901 when Australia went to the Federation.
Yep.
But, yeah, I'm going to say Australia as a country started having elections from the very start of it being called Australia. With these, so we've actually highlighted some questions here because they're all from the same school. They're all from Rendlesham Primary. We got a question from Poppy and from Lincoln, but yeah, these are the questions that are like, would you elect me if I was in it? Why can't I get elected? If I was a prime minister, then I would make recess longer, says Poppy. Well, Rendlesham Primary, if you are watching, why don't you have a vote within your class to see if you can elect a prime minister? So anyone that wants to run in your election, you can put your hand up, you can get up to the front of class and say why you should be prime minister, have a little campaign of sorts, and then everyone can vote. It may not be, you could do preferential voting, that might take a little longer though. You could just do a vote of hands and see who gets elected prime minister of your class. That sounds fun. Yes. Would you vote for someone who wants to make recess longer?
Yep, I would.
Yeah,
I would.
but then at the cost of what? Making lunch shorter.
Well, that's what I'd want to. That's what I'd want to hear.
Yes,
It's a very enticing promise, but we've got to hear at what is the cost.
That's
of this.
right. Yep. Perhaps we could make the period between recess and lunch shorter. If that were the case, then perhaps more people might be on
Or
board.
would you make recess longer at the expense of lunch being a bit shorter?
Or maybe school ends later because you've just made the whole day longer. Then you've got to pay teachers a little bit longer.
See, it's tricky to be a
It's
politician.
quite
Think
tricky.
about all these things.
Yep. All right.
Okay, so
Just saw a question that says, "What is the point of elections?" So,
what is the point?
What is the point? Well, if without elections, which is what we do in Australia and in democratic countries, you basically just run the risk of someone who's the strongest or most powerful stepping up and saying, "Don't worry, guys, I got this. I'm in control." And while that sounds like a cool thing to do in a classroom setting, it's actually not a great idea to do for a whole country, because you might end up with someone who acts just in their own interests, and we call that a dictator or the leader of an autocracy, I think. But it's basically just one person who has all the power, and you don't really want that. Most people agree that it's probably a good idea to have the people living in the country all chipping in and having a say at how they think it should be run. So that's the point of elections, is to check to see, hey, Joseph, who do you want to be in power this time around for the next 3 years? Hey, Nat, who do you want to be in power for the next 3 years? That's the main reason we have elections.
Much better answer than I was expecting from that question. So there we go. All right, I think it's time to wrap things up. So we're going to do. I'm not sure if we've been doing this past few weeks because I haven't actually watched. But
Yes.
do we still do the read out school names and you have to say a different hello for each of them? Because we're going to do that.
I haven't been doing
We're going to do that. We're going to
Okay.
bring that back.
All right.
Any historical watchers of BTN
Yes.
Live, which was formerly Ask a Reporter?
What's that?
I don't know, but that's what we're going to do. So
right.
St Mary MacKillop College.
Hello.
Yeah.
Gotta start with a basic.
Ormiston College.
Goodbye.
Oh, we're going to throw some good. Okay,
I'm
okay.
not sure.
Not greetings. We have greetings and
That is a...
Still a Greek.
that is a greeting, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry, never mind. Don't mind me. St John's College.
Salve.
That's a good one. Trinity Anglican School in Cairns.
Sampai jumpa.
St Patrick's Primary School.
Sayonara.
Upwee High School.
I'm going to go back to English for this one. Catch you later.
Ah, that's a good one. Daniela Heights Primary. Dianella Heights Primary. I'll get that one at some point.
No words.
Good Shepherd Catholic Amaru Primary.
I'm fresh out of greetings. See you next time.
Wallen Primary School.
Yep, catch you next time.
Rendlesham. Yeah.
See you, Rendlesham.
Yeah, Rendlesham. Yucca Future Learning.
Have a great weekend.
We love that. Phoenix Community College.
Up from the ashes.
Holy Spirit Primary.
Yes, catch you next time.
Yeah, St Ollie's.
Oh, you're running me dry.
yeah,
Everything.
we've only
I
got a
don't even
couple
know what
more,
words
mate,
to say
couple
now.
more.
You take care now, and return the containers when you're done.
St Nicholas.
Have a safe Friday.
In the classical school.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. All right, well, that's all we have time for this episode of BTN Live. Thank you all for watching.
Great.
We hope you learned some very important things.
Yes, despite the technical difficulties, we got through some good ones.
We did. So thank you all for all your questions. And, tune in next week for whatever exciting story ends up doing this.
Yes. All right. See you next week.
All right. Ciao.